Hello everybody. Welcome to Cannabis Unfiltered. Today's guest is Nic Easley, the CEO of 3C, also the co-founder and managing director of Multiverse Capital. Welcome, Nic.
Hey, good morning, Skip. Thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely. We've got some exciting stuff today. We're going to talk about investment themes in COVID-19. But before we dive in, Nic, let's hear about your background. You've got a very interesting background in the cannabis space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been in it for almost a decade and a half on the legal side, but originally from farm country in Wisconsin. Did 4 years in the United States Air Force and got hurt in the service. Came out to Colorado for a pretty place to recover and found medical cannabis, got a medical card very early, back before any of the commercial medical or adult use programs were even started. But then through that process, 2006 through 2008, I saw the first commercial business licenses actually happening in Colorado. And through that process, helped a lot of friends and caregivers start to make those first initial commercial cannabis businesses that were licensed and regulated by the state of Colorado. Through that, now we've gone up to 34 states that have some sort of medical program, 11 states that have adult use programs, and over 21 countries that have some sort of international medical cannabis regime. There's also Canada and Uruguay that have international adult use programs, and through this process have worked in nearly 30 countries, over 30 states, with cultivation companies, extraction companies, packaging companies, manufacturing, investment firms, and have really seen all segments of the industry. So when I look at the investment space, cannabis, by not being federally legal, we have this massive void of where you can actually get capital for funding businesses. So we work with small, medium, large-sized companies in their fundraising pursuits, as well as structuring their businesses to get business licenses. So be it the operations or the ancillary services and companies that service them, we've worked with this and been here for almost 15 years.
Great, thanks, Nic. Maybe we'll just touch for a second on federal regulation. We've got an election coming up. Biden chose Kamala. We're not sure what's going to happen there, but what are your thoughts either way on cannabis federal regulation changing?
Well, the United States is a big superpower. We think that the world really responds to our movements. Sadly, when it comes to international drug policy and reform, we're not the leaders of that. That's through the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the UN, like the United Nations. Now, if you're a Native American, you probably wouldn't trust the United States government following certain treaties. And some of the treaties that we follow for international drug policy are just that, like the Single Convention on Psychotropic Substances from 1961 and 1971 from the United Nations. So before there's some sort of federal legalization, I would more expect some sort of federal decriminalization, similar to like what Portugal did, in which many states and municipalities around the country have already started for decriminalizing cannabis. Medical cannabis, being a disabled veteran myself, is my forefront and really my passion, helping patients get access to safe, quality, and affordable medicines. But in the United States, be it one president or another, they don't necessarily have the power to just legalize cannabis, be it medical or adult use, because it could put the United States in jeopardy of certain international conventions which allow for pharmaceutical manufacturing, imports and exports of psychotropic substances, which cannabis currently is. So even though Biden and his new VP candidate and with Trump, neither one has a very strong position on cannabis, nor a negative one. So my thoughts, and at least when it comes to federal legalization, our industry is so nascent, it's not ready to be federally legalized. We do need decriminalization. We need like the war on drugs to stop and stop putting people in jail for having a gram of cannabis and ruining their chances to get student loans or jobs in the future, especially if they're using it for medicinal reasons. But I really think that depending on who gets elected this next year, it really is going to give the industry another 4.5, 5 years to get its shit together. Because we as an industry, we're this patchwork of different states, different rules, different laws, where cannabis prices might be $600 wholesale in Oregon, where there's massive production, copious amounts of licenses, and then a state like Illinois, where there's only 12 adult use producers currently until the next licenses are awarded, where grams could be upwards of $20, $30 for a gram of cannabis. Now, it wouldn't be very hard to move beef jerky from one state where they have lots of cows to a state that wants to buy a bunch of beef jerky that doesn't have many cows. But currently, based on federal legalization and the lack thereof, interstate commerce isn't an option. So I see this next 4 to 5 years really as an opportunity for the industry in their own states and jurisdictions to continue to create market share, develop new products, understand consumer trends, and get larger and larger. So when federal legalization or decriminalization happens on a medical standpoint or adult use standpoint, the industry goes from being a patchwork hodgepodge of all these thousands of companies all over doing different things into an industry that's ready and primed for strategic M&As, mergers and acquisitions, massive companies going public on NASDAQ, not just crappy little startup, penny stocks in Canada that have, some of which have turned large. But that's really the moment where if Trump stays in power, we have another 4 years of the same thing, same shit, different day, probably a lot worse, at least when it comes to things outside of cannabis. But I wouldn't expect more federal legal intervention. The industry is too big to fail at this point, where you have nearly 300,000 jobs created in the space. Colorado, I just saw for July, just record sales set, almost 158 million in 1 month of adult use sales. Add up the medical sales, almost $200 million in revenue. It's nearly $7 million in sales a day happening. And that's just of products, not for the electricity, the buildings, the lights, the water, the fertigation, the packaging, the legal, the consulting, on and on and on. So the industry is growing so large, but we do need to have some sort of federal reform where the federal government cannot continue to use funds against state legal and sanctions, medical, or adult use cannabis programs. You see other countries evolving with this at the same time, where Uruguay just approved exports, not just on a medical standpoint, but they're trying to figure out how to export adult use cannabis to Canada and to other countries. So as we see more countries looking to this and more municipalities losing tax revenue, there's more even cities and counties within states that are legal that have had moratorium. We don't have hospitality, we don't have hotels, we don't have as many taxes coming in. We're losing a lot of jobs, nearly 50 million people unemployed in the United States. Here's this new industry that's regulated that could be a new opportunity for tax revenue and job creation. So I think many cities within legal states are thinking that. We already have 13 states that are pushing ballot initiatives for this November to start to legalize the process, be it for medical or to move for adult use, just like Arizona. So I'm really optimistic for this next amount of time, regardless of which presidential candidate gets elected, which, hopefully, hopefully Americans and voters make the right decision here. But it's not going to impact our industry as much as others might think.
Yeah, so it's a complex patchwork. And yeah, I agree, Nick. I think the number of processes at the federal level for legalization would be immense. I mean, all the agencies, everybody would, just the way that it would have to go would take years anyway, but one step at a time, I guess. Let's move to investment. So when you think about investment then, with all of that on the horizon, what do you like? Are you favorable for distressed type assets? Do you like limited license opportunities or cash flow companies? What's on your mind?
Well, the coronavirus kind of caught us off guard as a people, be it in the United States and all over the world. It's got people for the first time having this fear, and also something that's unifying all of us. The fear is the biggest danger when it comes to the coronavirus right now, where people don't know what the fuck's happening, what's going to be happening. Am I going to lose my job? Am I going back to school? There's so much concern here that it really causes deer in the headlights syndrome, where be it companies, be it operators, be it consumers have no idea what's happening. The regulators as well. So the investment landscape, when you think last year, there was almost 15 times more direct investment in the week than there was last week this year. So consumer spending patterns are down, but cannabis sales stay up. So we know this plant is recession and depression proof, 100%. The industry, not so much. We're not federally legal. We don't have bankruptcy protections. We had no access to any of the SBA loans, the PPP loans, the multi-trillion dollars in stimulus. Our industries didn't qualify. So when it comes to investments now, many companies that were growing and scaling on a normal trajectory lost access to even interested investors, because those investors are like, I have no idea what's going on. This whole thing could go down. so much money has like come off the table. And many investors, like they're looking for quick liquidity or options to be able to make quick moves. And that's why the public companies are so attractive when it comes to cannabis to many investors now, because they can invest and pull out their money, the next day, same day. Many of the cannabis industry for like early stage companies thinking seed capital, Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D, IPOs, it's not the normal trajectory right now. It's a hold, survive, weather the storm, because this plant and the demand for it has existed for hundreds of thousands, millions of years from our species. It's going to stay around, and the illicit market is booming. The legal industry is booming, but access to the capital to keep doors open is lacking. So many of the things I'm liking now, there are, like you said, many distressed assets. Companies that were doing great were not prepared for this pandemic. How could you be? Thinking about social distancing, thinking about online ordering, curbside pickup. How do I maintain a staff of 200 cultivators and trimmers and massive operations on multi-acre facilities and keep them spread apart when I normally would have them all at certain places in the assembly line? So I think the most valuable capital now is for the companies that had proven track records, had positive EBITDAs, have cash flows, and need the capital to stay in business, be it ancillary or be it the direct hands-on companies. Right now, there are still many licensing opportunities available in new states and jurisdictions, even in new countries, for new licenses for cultivation, manufacturing, import, export, distribution, genetics, R&D. There's still opportunities. And limited licenses states and countries, in a state like Illinois, where there's only going to be about 150 dispensaries for, millions and millions of people compared to Colorado, it's a massive opportunity because it's so limited and hard to get in. Now, would I invest into a cultivation operation in Oregon right now, or Oklahoma, or Washington, or Colorado, where there's thousands of these cultivators? They're all like maggots in a bucket fighting for market share. But limited licenses in new jurisdictions, pre-corona, corona, post-corona, will always be on the forefront of my interest, because it's a new opportunity to help a team develop a successful business that then eventually big mergers and acquisitions can happen from. Also, what's really intriguing right now are supply chains. Supply chains are broken. I mean, the United States for months couldn't even figure out how to make a face covering. You think about complicated ethanol extraction equipment, O-rings, specific lighting filaments that are needed for some of these cultivation facilities. Many of those went away when Corona started. It's getting harder and harder to order certain goods. So many of the things that are the common, hate to say it, the picks and shovels of the industry are not available. And those picks, instead of being $10 a pick, are like $37 a pick. And these blue jeans that were $20 are now $150. So there are opportunities for domestic US companies or companies in other jurisdictions that can help to alleviate those supply shortage concerns that can really corner markets. There's a few public companies, I'm not going to mention names, that have been silently acquiring many of the picks and shovel companies of the industry. I'm not talking here about Gavita and Advanced Nutrients and different companies that do nutrient lines and from Monsanto based. This is specifically steel, benches, greenhouses, lights, extraction equipment. Those are the companies that see this longer term vision, knowing that as the industry continues to produce, we're still going to need greenhouses and packaging and analytical testing and all of these other aspects. That's why I'm thinking now, distressed assets, people that supply goods and services, or companies that there's this thing that happens with new companies like burnout. And already after working for, let's say, 3 to 5 years and scaling and taking market share and bashing after competitors and going after lawsuits, normal companies, they get kind of burned out. You had normal company burnout on top of pandemic. Some people, they just want out and they don't know where the exit is. They can't just go public. It's not easy like 2018 to just sell yourself on some concept to a Canadian public company. So I think there's a lot of founders and people that they're scared. They don't know what the future holds. They built some good companies and they just want out. I saw one in California yesterday, 9 licenses on a parcel, one of the lowest tax jurisdictions in California. Doing the math, this thing could almost do $500 million in revenue in the next 5 years. And they're right at the process of needing to pull the trigger, spend about $10 million to build this whole thing out. But for $8 million, they'd take a full exit right now because they don't know the future. They're homeschooling their kids. They've got things going on at home. All of that uncertainty leads to massive opportunity. It's like we say, like when there's blood in the water, that's when the sharks eat. And now is the best time I've ever seen for making very strategic and positive investments in the cannabis industry.
Great, thanks, Nic. Let's talk about the other side. When you think of investments, what are your no's? When do you walk, or what signs do you see where you just say, no, you're not going to take a look at it?
You know, as an investor, it's always what you say no to that's more important than what you say yes to.
That's right.
And in cannabis, for years, it was just like, I'm a cannabis company. I'm going to be $1 billion industry. I'm going to like, so any company that isn't rooted in reality, and specifically whatever the company is or does, if you take that word cannabis out and you look at it, if it's not attractive from a normal business standpoint, it's not attractive to me on a cannabis standpoint either. Just because it's cannabis, it doesn't make you unique anymore. Like, what is your strategic advantage? What's your like unique thing that you do that no one else does? Is it protectable? Is it scalable? Is there a possible exit from it? So many of the companies, if it's a hands-on company, like a plant touching company, a grower, a manufacturer, an edibles maker, a dispensary, a delivery company, I always look at what their jurisdiction is. What's the state? What's the trajectory for that state for adult use legalization? Or how's the adult use legalization going? What are the neighboring states? How many licenses did they issue? What are the tax like and costs of maintaining that license? Specifically, like with that management team, like, do they know cannabis? Do they know outside industry? If they know outside industry, it's much more important to me than just having some unique way of growing or this unique light that tweaks this one little thing. It has to be forward looking. Many of the investment theses and pitches that I see currently, it's for what the industry was in 2016 to 2018. This new light, this new product's going to double your yield. It's not like the industrialization of cannabis. And that's where the industry is going instead of these small little mom and pop operators, God bless them, for making medicine for people for years and years. But their cost of goods is so high compared to a scaled, large scale company. I'm not interested in small little cabinets where you can grow weed under your counter, or like some small little hand trim machine, or this thing to make butter. It's like, what are large scale cultivators and operators going to be using? Where is the industry going, and how are they going to position themselves from that? Specifically, even from like different IP companies, from intellectual property or the drug development, drug discovery space. You know, the common mantra in our world when it comes to domestic US companies, this is where we make our money. One of the world's largest cannabis markets. But then the international arena is what's going to be long-term so much more profitable, and probably where cannabis is produced and imported to the United States, be it for medical purposes, adult use purposes, bulk API, like active pharmaceutical ingredient development. That's where the industry is going. But right now we have to operate in these small little markets. So if it's unique in its small sort of market share, it hasn't made any past mistakes. They had, like, if they're running their companies, they don't have past recalls, operational problems, lawsuits, but there has to be something unique at this point, because just being cannabis isn't enough. You know, what I watch out for, I hear a couple of acronyms. I hear CBD, I'm out almost instantaneously. Great cannabinoid, one of hundreds. We love it, but then you get CBG popping up, CBN, all of these varieties of cannabinoids that we barely even understand. But if you're just wagon of CBD now in 2020, you're shit out of luck, friend. You're not unique. You're not doing anything special. Thousands of other companies are doing this before you. The regulations keep on changing. So unless you already have market share, scale, and something unique in quality, how do we even know that that product's bona fide, tested, legal to sell in different markets? Where's your bulk supply coming from? What makes you unique other than buying 55-gallon drums of this oil, putting it into a package with a label, and hustling it and just selling goods like it's Nike shoes? So those are some of the things. The normal buzzword bandwagons, we see far too many of them. And if you don't have a license yet, and you're trying to go for a license and raise capital, no, that's probably one of the hardest places to do it. But getting that license, getting that valuation, that's what really makes something unique from a hands-on standpoint as well.
Great. Let's follow on to that with some talk about diligence. So when you think about investing, then you covered some items in what you just said, but how do you go through diligence, and how do you really validate these things? Because I know obviously with early stage, sometimes you're told things, sometimes you don't look. Like I know investors who lost billions of dollars in the market. And, Diligence may have found that with some skills and knowledge, but how do you go about it, Nic?
It's kind of like they say, the numbers don't lie, and like trust but verify. So if you're an existing company, or if there's an existing company that's raising capital, first thing, make some audited financial statements. Not you, a certified like public accountant, a controller, an outsourced CFO. Really get your shit together on a financial standpoint. Like I need to know, how much money did you start this company? How have you been using that capital? How have you redeployed that capital strategically? Because then I'm thinking, if I'm going to trust you with my capital or my LP's capital, do you know what you're doing? And have you used the capital you had before strategically? Also, have you gotten all of your legal due diligence ducks in a row? Like, is the company formed correctly? Board consent, controls, stock options, warrants. Like, what have you really done to create the infrastructure legally for the company? Is it protected? All of those things, they'll say, oh, we filed for our patents. Perfect. It better be part of your data room. So if you're raising cap, or one of the things I look for right away, even in the initial conversations, have they put together a data room? Do they have a business plan? Not like a 1980s business plan, but I need to know 10 key things from that business plan. Have they just made a fancy pitch deck? Is it just some guy that created some video games that can pitch and sound good looking for money, but doesn't really provide good returns? There's a lot of charlatans, a lot of fraudsters out there. And cannabis, it came from not the most legal place, so it didn't bring forth a lot of really good quality people. But you have to understand the metrics of your business. So the due diligence, do they have the licenses they say? So much of this is public record. How transparent are they? Who are their other owners? Like I said, audited financial statements. What's their strategic capital deployment plan? Or if I say to them in a due diligence call, like, what's your 5-year plan? Where do you see this company in 5 years? Oh, geez, I haven't really thought about that. I'm out, because you're supposed to use this capital to get bigger, take more market share, be more impactful in a more successful business. If you don't know or have an idea or a vision of where you're going to be in 5 years, how am I supposed to trust that you're going to use my capital wisely tomorrow? But you also need to specifically know what that due diligence, based on their audited financial statements, with their cash flow trajectory plan of how are they going to deploy that capital. With this $5 million, we're going to use $2.4 million to buy this, 1.25 to do this. Here's our monthly burn rate, staffing, payroll, marketing, branding, legal, tax, compliance. I need to see those line items that they've budgeted out a plan for how to use someone else's money to make that company grow, which many people just think, oh, I need like, I don't know, $3 to $5 million. If they say that in a due diligence process, I'm not interested either, because they don't know what they need, who they are, how they're going to use this capital, and what they want to become. That's really what you need to prove in your due diligence and in your data room. Gather all your documents. Make it easy for the investors to say yes. Give them the things they're going to need to review. I don't want to just be like, oh, you need capital. Great. We're in some conversations. And now we start talking months and months back and forth. If everything's ready and in one place, it's much easier to get to that yes or no decision, but they have to know specifically how much they need, how they're going to raise it, and what's the next stage of growth of that company.
Great, thanks. Let's talk global markets for a second. Are there global markets that you like, Nic, specific areas out in the world, that countries or larger, that you think are the best opportunities?
Well, you've got a lot. I mean, over this last 5 years, from some, we went from the United States, we started working in Canada, some of the first opportunities, then in Denmark, in Germany, then Portugal, and South Africa, then Colombia, then Peru, and then Sri Lanka, and then there's a lot of massive opportunities out there. People see this is a very powerful medicinal plant. This is a very potential large-scale industry that already is on the illicit side. Many countries are looking at it, just like states in the US, for economic growth. Now, when I think about the Earth, which, sorry to the flat earthers out there, but it's probably a round planet to the best of our knowledge, but countries that are close to the equator. Cannabis is a dioecious plant, boy plant, girl plant, makes one crop a year, makes a bunch of baby seeds, dies, grows the next year from those seeds. How and where can I grow an agricultural plant inexpensively, high quality, and also that has certain pharmaceutical compacts that's not a hard country to do business in? So I look first at which countries are legalized on that. Granted, patients need medicine in each jurisdiction, but independent of Canada or the United States or Uruguay right now, I'm talking the rest of the medical cannabis industry in the world, each country's coming up with their own program of importation or standards, or if they can cultivate or manufacture. And international, it's not about vape pens and beverages and edibles and topicals. It's about bulk flower and bulk oil. If I was Dole and I'm thinking about doing bananas, I'm probably not going to like get a bunch of licenses in Denmark or some islands in the English Channel to grow a bunch of bananas to ship them around the world. So I like, when I think about this international programs, I've really been excited about Mexico for years, but I've seen what a shit show it's become when it comes to their Supreme Court, the regulations, Canadian public companies meddling and messing it all up, combining adult use, medical, hemp all into one thing, thinking that was going to work. So I also look at the countries, how have they set up their laws and policies with the International Narcotics Control Board? How are they thinking about actually producing in their country for their own constituents and patients? And then how potentially through that would they have an international export commodity? Not just, let's grow some weed and make some money. That doesn't work. No offense, Georgia. No offense, Macedonia. No offense, Greece. No offense, most of those countries that did it in that way. And God bless them for taking the moment to try to legalize something that's been illegal for far too long. So internationally, I think, Mexico sounded exciting. I think Mexico will be a great place for hemp in the future, great for adult use tourism in the future. Not going to be an international medical cannabis leader. Colombia, really good law at first, kind of problematic processes. And a lot of groups just thought, oh, Colombia is perfect because it's near the equator. Well, yeah, it is. But then you've got really high mountains. You got these coastal sea places. You've got past kind of narco-terrorism. You've got unstable governments. You've got, past President Uribe like under house arrest right now. It's kind of a powder keg. But I love Colombia, been there many, many times, helped with many of the licenses there, and I see massive opportunity in Colombia, as well as in Peru based on their anticipated license process, even though it's already in the works. Many people are interested in Brazil. I think Brazil is going to be a nightmare. Great for hemp in the future, but based on the coronavirus and some other aspects, I'm not mentioning anything about corruption here right now, but Brazil's going to have some problems. The other ones that are some of my favorite, the European Union, massive, kind of like the United States when it comes to market share and economic opportunities. It's cold as fuck in Europe in the winter and kind of sucks. And there's a bunch of people close together. Land's expensive. You got angry people all over the place. Like, not the place where you want to grow bananas year round either. But then you have some countries like Spain and Portugal, with Portugal, some really amicable laws and licenses that could be an EU GMP producer of bulk API and flower, and a possible bridge for other countries producing. I also think that there's a few secret countries in Asia, not talking right now about China and their CBD plays and all of that, or Thailand's medical program now. But when you look at Malaysia, when you look at the Philippines, when you look at a couple of the other countries where cannabis used to be you talk about it, you die, compared to now being PICS countries, PIC-S, might have some very unique economic opportunities with this. Australia had some opportunities really early on, their medical program's getting better, but equally, just like South Africa and other places, the farther away from the equator, with a photoperiod plant where I'm trying to grow this year round, where I can have 12 hours of darkness, 12 hours of light, induce flowering, I think internationally would be the countries with the best regulations, that are the least unstable, with the best agricultural climates, and also favorable pharmaceutical laws and regulations that have not done things to shit on the INCB, the International Narcotics Control Board, which is keeps them in a high standing for pharmaceutical drug development, drug discovery. Israel, yeah, been awesome. Dr. Meshulam, years of research, all of the medical licenses, what some of those countries have done, great. Some of the problems with tax, political instability, not a member of the European Union. There's certain aspects where each country kind of has its strengths and weaknesses. And to me, I'll never put all my eggs in one basket. And I think that long-term, it's going to be a conglomeration of various countries, various companies within those countries that are going to take the massive market share that'll get the massive pharmaceutical exits. Hence, Peru, Colombia, Portugal, South Africa has a lot of promise, a lot of problems with coronavirus right now as well. The countries that can weather the storm, because we've all been prepping for this UN vote that's supposed to happen and keeps getting delayed from coronavirus, or China and Russia kind of mess with it. But when the UN, through the WHO, and they change their stance on this, or a potential deschedule or rescheduling, that's when international medical cannabis is going to explode. And when that happens, if you're trying to get into a country, you're already too late. So at my stage, prospecting the best opportunities in the best new markets to make the greatest good for the greatest number, also knowing even if I'm in the best country with the best laws and the best climate, shit happens. Companies fail. Fraud, deceit, misappropriation of funds. I mean, if you've seen like the movie Gold, it's like you build this great thing, you got this gold mine that's going on, you don't partner with the right homies. Government just takes away your license, gives it to the bigger homies that are more homies with them. I saw this yesterday with a property. Like, it happens time and time again. And so knowing human nature, you gotta like really diversify your investment strategies if you're getting into international medical cannabis or international adult use, which is completely illegal, but of course gonna happen long term. But going in and just going out there and prospecting and guessing, most investors aren't gonna find the right opportunities. International has a huge long hold position. It's not like I've got some short-term cash flow, some medium-term like acquisitions and IP deals, and then a public offering or an M&A, long-term. They're all medium to long-term investments. US is great for short, medium, and long, but if you go into the international arena without the right guidance, be it in investments or be it on the business operational side, you're most likely going to get burned like we've seen to countless investors internationally.
Great, thanks, Nic. We have time, I think, for one more question. Let's talk about investment vehicles now. So all the rage on Wall Street these days are special purpose acquisition companies, SPACs. We've seen some of these in cannabis pop up. Obviously in the US, not possible yet, but other countries like Canada, they are. Any thoughts on SPACs as vehicles, or what do you think? How will those play a role in cannabis in the future?
SPACs are great, and they've raised over $2 billion just sitting dry powder, just ready to go to war. The problem with most of the SPACs, which there's been a few of them, is that their investment thesis and based on the valuations and like what they set their mandate that they would use that money for, Corona happened and they thought it was here and now it's here. So a lot of them are just sitting and can't deploy that. I think some very strategic special purpose acquisition vehicles for either joining single state operators where you've got, let's call it dispensaries in California, great state, 40 million plus people, huge revenue, all broken down by municipalities and which cities are legal and not and how many they allow, all of that jazz. But if there was a SPAC, for example, it's like, I'm going to take $250 million and roll up as many of these single operators into one company. It's like, there's 40 different gas stations. I'm going to get them all and making them all shell. That sort of acquisition vehicle now would be incredible. Many are desperate. Coronavirus, we don't have, like I said, the federal bankrupt protection. So I think there's some very strategic, borderline predatory capital plays that can help out the operators, help out the investors, help out the industry. So SPACs are one option. There's always the public option. We're investing into public companies, but who knows? Because 95% of what they say is complete fraud and lies. It's all speculation, like, oh, this could happen, forward-looking statements, and it's really hard to verify some of the information. Our stock portfolio side would be up 40% when it comes to what's actually happening now. But you can get burned very easily on these public companies because, especially the Canadian ones, there's such lack of regulation and so much fraud and so much oversaturation that a lot of them are desperate right now. I think a lot of the cannabis venture funds, 70% of them have no idea what they're doing in the industry. They were great at Goldman's, great with Lehman Brothers, great with all the other stuff they did in Capital and wearing pinstripe suits, but they didn't understand the industry and they got distracted by these shiny things and that's a great idea and have lost hundreds of millions of dollars. A few other ones are doing pretty well. I think that when you can find good fund managers, even if it's small fee structure, they know the industry. It works in other industries, like for starting early stage companies. So private venture funds, I think, are a really good way to go. I also manage a few of those. And I think that with, the amount of opportunities that we have that need investments for portfolio companies, it's almost a no-brainer, not to go in this alone. Other access, cannabis REITs, real estate investment trusts, be it public or private, I think are phenomenal because when you have cannabis operational companies, you've got the need for property and lights and fertigation and rents and lease, all the tenant improvements that can be financed through real estate investments backed by the asset. Very secure. What bill do you pay first every month? your lease. Like it's where your license is. That's why you have to do it. So their returns are positive and always doing well, as long as it's the right types of buildings in the right states with the right operators. A lot of companies got burned on investing with the wrong ones of those. And then there's always direct private placements. Private companies that need capital that you hear about, need a couple $1 million, healthy valuation, maybe you get a board seat. But like I said, I don't put all my eggs in one basket. Putting all your investments into one company is very dangerous. Even if it's a baby little unicorn, it can fall and break its leg. You know, it can get eaten by a wolf, trampled by a guy in a buffalo. So diversifying those investments, be it through a REIT, be it through, if you're going to buy public stocks, you know, look at multiples. Like what's Cresco doing? What's GTI doing? What's Trulieve doing? Not so much worrying about what MedMen's doing anymore, but like, what are they doing? And maybe put some in a few of those. It's a good way to lose a lot of money too. And with coronavirus, I mean, I have no idea how the public markets are doing so well, but cannabis companies are starting to thrive through this. So I'd say like best bet, do your homework, do your research. Coronavirus has completely changed our investment thesis. Instead of like, what's our hold position? What sort of companies meet our mandate? Right now, I've definitely shifted my thesis a little to be adaptive in this time, because there's so many companies that are doing great things, making cash flow, growing. They just don't have that little extra gas or that turbo to make the turbo diesel like soar, and they're just chugging up the hill. So many of the private companies I think now need a couple extra gears to go a little faster, ramp things up. Investors can probably get 2 or 3 times more for their money right now in this next couple months to the end of the year, because this isn't going away anytime soon, folks. This is going to be around, and we have to weather the storm. We've already done it for 15 plus years as individuals. The industry, the plant's done it for hundreds of years with the problems that we've thrown at it. So now is like really the moment. If you're going to be investing, a lot of sectors are dangerous. Probably investing into the Cheesecake Factory or Dave & Buster's or Best Buy, not your best options right now. The whole world is changing. One thing that's not changing is this is a fucking amazing plant that we honor, love, protect, and are caregivers of, and protect this as the industry grows. The demand for this plant is only going to rise. More jurisdictions will legalize. Better education will continue. More people will be consuming this product. We'll have new innovations from it, new supplies needed to produce it, to test it, to regulate it, to insure it, to tax it, all of it. If there's one bet that I'm comfortable with, especially during a fucking depressing pandemic, alcohol sales, look at what's happening, way up. I'm not saying cannabis is just a vice industry, but many people are using cannabis right now therapeutically, stuck at home, a lot of uncertainty. Get medicine to the people, and this industry, like I said, we're not going anywhere. Many companies are going to fall, but it's going to be a time to build new empires, and it's a new like time in that game when you shake up the pieces again to like see what happens. The industry was getting pretty established. Players were getting bigger. This thing just earthquake, and now it's like, okay, what's going to happen? But remember, the earthquake's not over. So as you're navigating the investment space, the business opportunities, like know that things are going to continue to change. But where you put those chits on the board, you got to be out there with an umbrella singing in the rain right now, and not just standing there getting wet. And a lot of companies are just standing there getting wet and thinking like, this is going to pass. The sun's going to come up. I'm looking at the horizon, friends. It's gray, it's shitty, and it's going to get worse. But the opportunities are great. So find a good umbrella, do your homework, and keep it real with Real Talk, Cannabis Unfiltered.
Thanks, Nic. Yeah, chaos and uncertainty, I guess, is what we're
Entropy.
I like it. Anyway, thanks, Nic, for being on. Nic Easley, CEO of 3C and co-founder, managing director at Multiverse Capital. Thanks for tuning in to Cannabis Unfiltered.
Thanks, everybody.